Hello all. Today, the advisory team of Clingstone represents an overview of one of the hottest topics in the enterprise architecture nowadays. We will discuss a notion of business capability. A concept of business capability was defined 20 years ago based on previous 20 years of practice. At that time, we didn't know about massive outsourcing, digital economy, business services, clouds, and mobile applications, to mention just a few. Currently used definition disallows business leaders to consider new modern reality of the market and internal changes in the business management. In this presentation, we will show how to put the notion of business capability back on the progress rails. It will also demonstrate how to link enterprise architecture with real business capabilities via the realm of business services. This presentation is dedicated to enterprise business and technology architects, business and technology management that deals with planning of business functionality and resources, corporate executives interested in understanding of the core and structure of their business capabilities, and to all specialists working with modeling, business functionality, and operations. A topic of business capability, or BC, deserves a book, and a few of them are written already. Nevertheless, in our short presentation, we will try to take several views on this topic, including conventional opinions of people and the definition of a business capability, that is, what it is in reality. Who needs business capability and who creates them? How they may be used? What does mean a realization of business capability and its life cycle? And finally, how to promote the concept of business capability to those who have to work with it. In our daily work, we can hear that different people use a term business capability in different meanings. There are several schools of thoughts and we cannot criticize people for use of them, but we have not heard a definition which would be entirely reliable. In the slide, you can see a few scenarios where widely used understanding of business capability is challenged because we see certain ambiguity in how the term capability is used by many in the business. Some organizations like the Business Architecture Guild prefer to accept and promote interpretations of the term regardless its imprecision. This is why the scenarios and related questions in the slide demonstrate a few cases where the promoted definitions are not sustainable. Try to answer a few questions like this. Can somebody buy a capability? Can two different ownership share a capability? What capabilities a current business process might have confidently? If you are doing something today already, does it mean that you have a capability to do it? Does your current capability depend on the context where you work or will work? Remember or note your answers. Try to answer these questions again by the end of this webinar and compare the results to see if your opinion about business capability has changed. We do not claim our priority in defining business capability. Professor David Teece with colleagues did a perfect work with this regard in the mid-90s. For the last 20 years, however, world economy accelerated its global informational and computational abilities so much that even fundamental concepts, or at least meaning of them, require revision. Professor Teece has used the notion of business competences that was defined by Dr. Prahalad as a harmonized combination of multiple resources and skills that distinguish a company in the marketplace. While resources and skills are not only the artifacts that distinguish a company in the marketplace, nowadays resources may be available inside and outside of the company, but for these years, Professor Teece holds to this definition. He with colleagues defined business capability as a firm's ability to integrate, build, and reconfigure internal and external competences to address rapidly changing environments. It is unclear, however, how a firm can build and configure external competences existing under foreign ownership, and why just an integration between internal and external competences is valuable to the business. The pace of market change is so high now that the time of building and even integrating competences frequently exceeds the time of changes of the change. Yes, working with internal and external competences, that means resources, is the only way for agility with the market. But physical resources become a factor of risk of latency to the market needs. An idea of orchestration and combination of internal and external competences emerged in 2009-2010, but still a business capability was based on the firm's assets. By 2013, Professor Teece has cardinally changed his opinion and redefined business capability as a set of learned processes and activities that enable a company to produce a particular outcome. Well, competences or resources disappeared. The statement like "I know" means "I can" prevails, and business has lost particular instructions what to do and what a business capability is, besides a knowledge about it. At the same time, this was a step toward modern understanding of SOA. Business architecture evangelist Jeff Scott picked up the relay. In 2013, he published a series of blogs, and in 2014, he presented to OMG defining business capability. A business capability describes a unique collective ability that can be applied to achieve a specific outcome, but in the future. He said, since capabilities represent what an organization can do and not what it actually does, they can be viewed as potential. This was moved concept of capabilities to the OASIS SO standards even more. I also wrote in 2012 that business capability was not a business process, and in 2013, in my last book and an article in InfoQ, described two parts of business capability, functional and resource related. SOA, or service-oriented architecture, was not widely known when Professor Teece defined his dynamic business capability theory. Particularly, abstract SOA services allow for invocation of foreign capabilities without integration or reconfiguration of competences, external or internal. The SOA service works equally well with inside and outside of the company for addressing business changes. In the dominant majority of business cases, only a recomposition of services is needed rather than a new development. We will return to the topic of business capability and SOA later in this presentation. Let us involve a little formalism and define what a business capability is. In common sense and according to Oxford and Merriam-Webster dictionaries, a capability is an ability to do something. The point here is in the ability to do, and we will discuss what does it mean. When business is saying it is capable of doing something or it has a capability, it knows what it is, what to do. That is, it knows what business function or activity should be used. This function can be realized and executed when needed, in a moment or in a year, that is, in the future. Business knows what resources will be needed for realization and execution of this business function and for producing predicted values or outcome. This includes at least management, processes, legal rights, financial assets, human and material resources, equipment, skills, and production environment. If any of items required for the implementation and execution of capability is unavailable, we cannot realize this capability. Thus, if we cannot realize it, do we have it? Our answer is no. However, this does not mean that we have to possess all these items at once to claim a capability. Usually, business knows and plans when which business capability will be needed. So, we can say that each business capability is conditional. That is, something has to happen in order a capability materialized and executed. It may be an external or internal event, a situation in the market, a decision of the board, and so forth. Also, since the capability is for realization in the future, it is usually enough to plan or to reserve the resources rather than have them already. Such planning increases business flexibility in general because it is impossible to predict all changes in the company or in the market, even for a few stages of the business strategic plan, and correspondingly have a priori related capabilities. Therefore, we define the business capability as uh, an ability of a business entity, a person or business organization to identify needed business function, but implement and execute it, producing certain results or real-world effect when predefined business situation occurs. The baseline is this. We have made a competence a planned resource, human and technical, and scoped it, making applicable to the inside and outside of the company. We have identified the business core of the capability as abstract business functionality and real-world effect, while making the resources only a means of realization. This allows us to link business capabilities directly with the business architecture of enterprise, that is, to link abstract though resourced functions with the abstract structure of corporate functionality. Moreover, we have made a business capability conditional to be realized in the future. We have elaborated on the terms that must be met in order an organization of integration features to be uh, meant as a capability. Also, we have revoked configurations from the capability realm because if it is available, it is a current feature of existing resources. Following the OASIS SOA reference model standard, we have to outline that business service is the means of accessing a business capability or capabilities and or the result of their implementation execution. In essence, a service body is the capability implementation. An orchestration of services is the orchestration of capabilities. Finally, an enterprise business architecture, defined via business information and functionality only, and represented as business services, directly links business architecture to business capabilities in modern dynamic market. We believe that the updated definition of business capabilities reflect modern reality better than the old one. We can define different business capabilities for any business function, feature, line of actions, behavior, or activity. A business capability may be associated with any business unit. However, regardless of hierarchical subordination of business units, a capability is not necessarily inheritable top-down or bottom-up. Let's imagine a business division that contains a few business groups, each of which consists of a few teams. If a division has a capability to run a program, this doesn't mean that any of its groups can run a program. If a group can install a product, it does not mean that any team alone can install that product. At the same time, a business service that represents a capability or its implementation outcome can appear at any level of business hierarchy and at any level of business products as is, with no modifications. If different business units in a company create business capabilities using the same business function, just a difference in planned or reserved resources can result in different capabilities. In the mid-80s, Emmett and Shoemaker claimed that the competitive advantage of the company may be based only on unique, inimitable, and non-substitutable resources. This is not true anymore. A competitive advantage may be based on a unique combination of business services, that means business capabilities, and B, on the pace to the market. These two constitute business flexibility, an ability to compose and recompose business capabilities faster than the competitors can. Let us outline services and represented by them business capabilities may be engaged from anywhere, inside or outside of the company boundaries. These external services may be publicly available to the competitors as well, but the competitors also can have internal service similar to the company's ones. That means the variety of services is almost the same. However, the services themselves are not the key factor for competitive advantage anymore, but creativity or innovation and the speed and easiness of recomposition of services or capabilities are the keys now. We can define different business capabilities for any business function, feature, line of actions, behavior, or activity. A business capability may be associated with any business unit. However, regardless of hierarchical subordination of business units, a capability is not necessarily inheritable top-down or bottom-up. Let's imagine a business division that contains a few business groups, each of which consists of a few teams. If a division has a capability to run a program, this doesn't mean that any of its groups can run a program. If a group can install a product, it does not mean that any team alone can install that product. At the same time, a business service that represents a capability or its implementation outcome can appear at any level of business hierarchy and at any level of business products as is, with no modifications. If different business units in a company create business capabilities using the same business function, just a difference in planned or reserved resources can result in different capabilities. In the mid-80s, Emmett and Shoemaker claimed that the competitive advantage of the company may be based only on unique, inimitable, and non-substitutable resources. This is not true anymore. A competitive advantage may be based on a unique combination of business services, that means business capabilities, and B, on the pace to the market. These two constitute business flexibility, an ability to compose and recompose business capabilities faster than the competitors can. Let us outline services and represented by them business capabilities may be engaged from anywhere, inside or outside of the company boundaries. These external services may be publicly available to the competitors as well, but the competitors also can have internal service similar to the company's ones. That means the variety of services is almost the same. However, the services themselves are not the key factor for competitive advantage anymore, but creativity or innovation and the speed and easiness of recomposition of services or capabilities are the keys now. We deliberately titled this slide as "Who Needs" rather than "Who Uses" business capability. It is a matter of fact that many specialists who need to work with capabilities do not do this. Some of them do not know what really a capability is. Some of them think that the real business capability is what they think it has to be. Some others do not see a value in operating with capabilities because they don't see direct relationships with existing operational processes and technical systems. As business practice over the last 5 years shows, business capability is a very convenient description of work that the top-level corporate management, senior and middle-level management, marketing specialists, and enterprise architects can use in their daily activities. It allows articulation of functions, actions, and related resources at different level of granularity for different tasks, categories of tasks, problems, and their solutions. At the same time, real value of business capability requires a discipline where certain roles perform actions, but only a regulated mixture of them is allowed. For example, business architects or strategy planners should define what business capabilities should materialize in which stage of the enterprise transition along the strategic business plan. Such decisions are not a prerogative of line, domain, or product managers. Analogous situations should be preserved at each level where business capabilities identified at each business unit that has its own business plans. Creation of a business capability requires a special process and procedures. It belongs neither to enterprise business architecture nor to the corporate management alone. A defined business capability is a result of joint work of an architect role and a manager role. For instance, a strategic business capability is a joint work of the enterprise business architects and the senior managers. It would be inaccurate to consider that a corporate strategic business plan comprises only strategic business capabilities. It is too expensive, and there is no time to develop strategic business capabilities prior to the strategic business plan. Instead, it contains only directions in certain time frame regarding needed business functionality and related resources at the very high, we would say, conceptual level. Some managers, especially senior managers, try to push the business capabilities that they believe are crucial for the well-being of their departments through the strategic business plan. If such things happen, this usually leads to the troubles for the company later on, because that one capability that appears in the strategic plan comes out of sync with other capabilities defined later on. We should not mix strategic business plan with business development plan. They serve different purposes. A development of a business capability includes two major phases and can go through them recursively. The first phase, business architects, not the C executives, define the functional part of the business capability. And then, in the second phase, the corporate managers plan and reserve resources for the business capability implementations. Upon resource planning, some functionality may be reviewed and changed because of the resource availability or constraints. This development is an iterative process. Finally, the draft capabilities are mapped to the transition steps corresponding to the strategic business plan, and in this form represented to the C executives and board for the review and approval. It is a good practice where several models of business capabilities and transition steps are offered to the approvers for their selection. Business architects, together with senior management, usually develop a few layers of business capabilities of different granularity and for different domains. The outcome of this work appears as an input to the development of the business capabilities of individual divisions, departments, and groups. The most difficult part in this cascading development is in the meeting and matching lower-level assumptions about business capabilities needed with the ones coming from top down. Such matching are error-prone and risky procedures that require special governance and management. Business capabilities can be used in many different situations, for different purposes, and in different combinations. We have listed only a few of them in the slide. Each business role, like executive, business, or technology architect, has its own interests in the business capabilities. The majority of these interests are: first, understanding of the company's position in the market regarding its competitors and consumers, and planning for the BC combinations that can lead to the competitive advantage. Second, finding operational and technology gaps when comparing the BC to the next transition step with current functionality and resources. The third, maintaining an integrity between different BCs in the transition process while adjusting the EBCM. And the fourth, maturing business functionality of the company. The topic of maturity was raised before, and we are going to talk about it right now. A BC itself cannot be more or less matured, but its implementation can. A business function or feature are either available or not. When we design a business capability, we plan for particular business function. If we also plan for certain performances of implementation of this function, we can talk about maturity in this case, but this will be related to the performances, not to the function itself. The only known exclusion from the aforementioned explanation is related to the complex BCs. A complex BC can be decomposed to a set of fine-grained BCs. This allows us to design an implementation of initial BC in a sequential phase. phase by phase. In the first phase, for example, only A and B finer-grained BCs are implemented. In the next phase, the following C, D, and E finer-grained BCs are implemented, and so forth, until all fine-grained BCs parented by the initial BC are complete. Actually, we substitute the implementation of the initial BC by implementation of the fine-grained BCs, but now we can claim that from step to step of the transition, the functionality of initial BC matures. We have to clearly differentiate between a BC and its actual implementation. A BC contains a plan of implementation and some ideas about required resources. However, in some cases, the implementation itself may be too laborious, which requires starting it before the conditions of the capability realization occur. There is a nuance that we have to handle carefully. As a minimum, a complete implementation of the BC should not, should not be executed until the BC conditions happen, because when it is executed, the BC transforms in a regular feature of the business system and becomes extinct as a capability. We have to note two other aspects of the BC implementation. They are, first, if we have a shortage of particular implementation resource, there is a probability that the BC would still be implemented with this limited resource. Otherwise, the BC becomes extinct. Second, if a resource depends on the business execution context, which changes and prohibits or eliminates the resource, the BC becomes extinct again. So, when we claim having a business capability, we have to make sure that the implementation resources are still available. Here is a question. If a business capability transforms into a regular feature of the business system upon realization, what are the terms for keeping related functionality as a business capability going forward? We believe you know the answer already. Particularly, the only what is needed is to plan and reserve the resources for implementation or execution of this functionality in the future. Recall, if we do something today, it does not guarantee us that we will be able to do it tomorrow. There are a million reasons why it might not happen. So, to keep a business capability, you have to keep its resources for the future. The life cycle of a business capability comprises several phases. It is creation, when functional design and resource planning take place. Existence, transformation into a systems feature when the implementation process happens. Non-existence, and creation again, and so forth. So, realizing business capability becomes extinct until a new planning of business functionality and implementation resources is performed. The notion of ownership in the realm of business capabilities is comprehensive but not simple. When we say that a business unit, including a company itself, has a business capability, we first of all mean that the capability's business function or functions are in the roster of the company's business model or strategic business plan. But no company can claim an exclusive right on the business function. Another company may have the same function in the same time in its arsenal. A business function defines and describes what the company is about, but by itself does not provide a competitive advantage. In many cases, a company owns the capabilities resources. That is, the company plans, reserves, and even implements the capability. We will talk about outsourcing capabilities in a few moments. There is nothing wrong if two companies use the same resources at the same time for their capabilities. In this case, the resources are owned by a third party and companies have contracts with it. Those capabilities may be the same or different. Also, a company's capability can utilize several different resources that belong to different owners. The details of ownership of capabilities retained in rich literature in business services and service-oriented ecosystem domain. The relationship between business services impacts the business capabilities represented by them. And the simplest case is where the business service not only represents one business capability but also owns it. The much more complex situation is where services become orchestrators and outsource resources. That is, other services that own these resources can provide them and can be engaged by this outsourcing service. We will talk about this matter in the next slide. For the recent years, a phenomenon of outsourcing has broken a monopoly of the company on the capability itself and on its resources. Here are two outsourcing models we will discuss in this presentation. First, a capability may be outsourced as is. The outsourcing company now owns the capability. That means it owns the resources and includes the capability function into its functional domain. The initial company can still consider and maintain the same function in its functional domain. Moreover, the initial company can still have mechanisms for involving this function and the elements that consume the capability implementation results. Unfortunately, outsourced capability is a lost capability. Second model. An initial company can outsource resources only. Cloud computing, especially of type infrastructure as a service, is a classic example of this. Particularly, the initial company contracts external resource providers and composes their capabilities into its own. This pattern is also typical of composite business services like orchestrators. In this case, the initial company owns the orchestrator or invocation logic, which becomes the asset used to support the initial business function. The aforementioned pattern provides the highest level of business flexibility and can lead to competitive advantage. The conditions of obtaining this advantage are: first, contractual basis of the relationship between initial company and its external resource providers or supplier. Second, the redundant contracts that allow quick and easy replacement of the provider. And the third, which is optional but powerful, is a change in the perception of internal resource providers, who now can become exchangeable with the external ones. We can say that a company still owns a business capability in outsourcing only whilst it controls the logic of resource invocation in the capability implementation. At the end, here is an example. Let's try to figure out what business capabilities a regular business process has or might have. In our opinion, any business process is just a repeatable sequence of steps linked by the business logic or rules of the process. This business logic is one of possible decompositions of the business function that the process realizes. So, the first business capability of a business process is an ability to realize the same business function in the given context. Another business capability is an implementation of the business logic step by step. A business process can react to the triggers event and obtain an input data. During its execution, it can also obtain intermediary inputs. The ability to accept inputs and produce certain outcomes is the one more business capability of the process. In the properly designed business process, the intermediary inputs and outcomes are controlled by predefined interfaces and related service level agreement statements. If these interfaces and SLAs are preserved by the actual providers, they themselves and their activities become immaterial or arbitrary to the process. The process can accept and use intermediary inputs from anybody who can use those interfaces according to the SLAs. For example, if a construction process requires landscaping at the beginning and some interior work at the end, the unified procedures of accepting the work done, that means the interface, abstracts the teams who did this work. Therefore, the capability of sub-processes or related providers cannot be counted for the given business process. Since we consider only business capabilities that the business process has by itself, we have identified only 3 of them so far. So, why are we so sure that these are the only ones? Regardless how many times the business process is repeated in the same execution context, its realized function, its logic, and its input-outcome interfaces remain the same. If any intermediary data provider changes or its capability change, this does not affect the business process. However, if a business logic changes, the business process vanishes together with its business capability to execute that logic. If the business function is not needed anymore, the business process that realizes this function vanishes as well. The only capability that can change without destroying the process is the ability to accept the inputs and produce outcomes via particular predefined interfaces in accordance with the SLAs. That is, if over the time needed data may be provided via new interface or, for example, faster, different SLA, the resources of the acceptance capability may be refined, demonstrating the power of the new understanding of business capability. We think it is the right time to update our thoughts and understanding after 20 years of the use of business capability and educate the decision makers about new features in the new business execution context. We believe that the proper separation of concerns and duties in the modern highly dynamic and fast business environment results in that business architect roles prepare inputs to the strategic business plan and develop business capabilities jointly with the senior corporate management. 2 components of business capability allow tactical and strategic evaluation of business functionality separately from the planning resources both internal and external. Over the time, the planning may be refined independently from the functionality if the conditions of the market changed. For a business capability to exist for a long time, its functionality should be in demand, and its resources should be planned or reserved for the same long time ahead. The business capability designers or architects have to work in the close proximity to the senior functional and operational management. That is, they have to share an understanding of what the capability is and what it is not. Without such lingua franca, chances of the company's success in the market are quite low. This is all what I have to say to you today. Thank you. You can contact us with your proposals for new presentation or with questions at any time via the email address you see on the screen. Now we are ready to answer your questions.